Welcome. My name is Marty Major with FLIR Security's TCX Training Department. We're here today to talk about adaptive streaming, which is FLIR Security's technology that we use in order to save bandwidth for live viewing and also some system resources. And we'll talk about as we go forward exactly what that means. So, if you can see our agenda here today, in reverse order, we're actually going to see a live control center demo right at the end where I can show adaptive streaming actually working. We're going to talk about adaptive streaming before that, of course, before we can actually show it. But what we do need to talk about is the underpinning sort of a bedrock, basically, of adaptive streaming, and that is multi-streaming or multi-stream encoding. So what is multi-stream encoding? Well, in a nutshell, it is basically the ability for the cameras. First of all, that's the, you got to have that first. The VMS can utilize the extra streams that a camera can send, but the camera absolutely has to be able to multi-stream by itself. And most modern day cameras now have that capability. And as digital signal processors get stronger and faster and better, we will be able to it'll be a commonplace thing where almost all cameras can multi-stream more than two. I think most cameras can stream two now, some can stream three, and now we're getting up into the four and even more streams that some cameras can produce. So multi-stream encoding, however, is the VMS's ability, Latitude's ability to actually encode the streams that are available coming from the cameras. So why should we use multi-stream encoding? Why can't I use the same stream for everything? Well, I could, but again, it's sort of limiting me then to a couple of factors. And with multi-stream encoding, we can sort of overcome those factors. So basically, if you see down at the bottom here, multi-stream encoding has three primary benefits. The first one, of course, is the system resource utilization, right? The client machine, the control center machine, has to decode each one of the streams that are being sent to it. If you have a big 4K camera, for instance, and each one of your panes in a multi-pane layout would all be having to decode all 4K, the entire amount of pixels and stuff that the higher resolution camera is sending. So to be able to send a different stream to smaller panes is really the secret for multi-stream encoding. And then to have the system automatically do it on its own, that's the adaptive streaming that we're going to talk about here. So the second one here, you can see it decreases bandwidth utilization for live viewing. If you don't need to send a 4K stream to a particular pane because it's too small to be able to render all or any benefits from the extra pixels of that 4K stream, then of course, one, we talked about saving the system resource. The system doesn't have to decode it all, but if you don't send it across the network, of course, you're saving the bandwidth then because you're sending only what can be used by the individual streams or individual panes. And then the last one here is decreases bandwidth utilization for remote viewing. Again, if you have multiple streams to be able to choose from to send to various things, maybe remote viewing is the toughest thing to be able to get it out to, right? Or maybe they have a smaller device that they're viewing it on, an iPad, an iPhone, etc. No need to send the big streams when you can send the small ones that are enough for the size of the screens that are being utilized, or the low bandwidth connections basically between the networks. So multi-stream encoding, I think, is being used by a lot of people now. Some people are not sort of using it in quite a smart way, a way where you actually have to do it yourself. And that's what this is all about right here. So you've got three different monitors on your control center machine. On the left here, we have our 4K monitor with a 1x1. It can actually display the entire 4K stream because it is a 4K monitor. The middle monitor down here on the bottom, however, same 4K monitor. However, if I have a scene or a pane basically that's this small, it's probably better and more suited to send a smaller stream to this area. If I were to send a 720p stream and then right next to it send the 4K stream, visually there's no benefit for that 4K stream here simply because there's not enough area in that scene, in this region right here, to display all 4K amount of pixels to this region. So on two different levels, it actually hurts you and it gives you no benefit at all. The first level is, of course, the system has to decode. If I were to go to the next screen here and show you what multi-stream encoding, or without multi-stream encoding, literally every stream would be sending a 4K amount of data to each one of these individual panes. So you're wasting tons of bandwidth for no visual benefit, and also you're crushing the system itself because it has to decode all of these individual streams. And with multiple monitors across a control center machine, you can see how that could become very problematic very quickly. So, multi-stream simultaneous encoding. I want to take a sort of sidestep here and take a look at FLIR's solutions. We can clearly encode multiple streams, but depending on the camera itself, it will show us on the little chart down in the bottom here the limitations of individual types of cameras. But you'll see right here in the middle, each encoded stream can then be used for different purposes. And in my example down here on the bottom right, I've got 4K stream because it has the ability to do so, or if it did, we'll talk about that in a second, for maybe the live viewing. However, maybe you bought those 4K cameras and you didn't budget for the extra storage that those would require because the streams are so much larger. So maybe you want to send a 1080 stream to the recording because that's what you had budgeted for. But you do, again, want to send that 4K stream to your live viewing so your guards can see those extra pixels, can utilize them by zooming in farther than they could before and really being able to see fine details. And then maybe you do have some remote viewing folks over a low bandwidth connection, and then you can send the D1 stream if that's available. So let's take a look over here on the left hand side and what this chart really means. If you look at this, it's broken down into two different cameras, our 4K camera and our Quad HD camera, which is a 1440p camera. And you can see each one of them has three lines. We'll stick to the 4K for now. If you look at the very top, the configured frame rate is the important category right here to know about when it comes to the limitations for certain streams. So if you look right here, our 4K camera, if you set the frame rate between 26 and 30, it will send you one stream, the 4K stream. If you drop your frame rate down a little bit, though, let that digital signal processor utilize some of its capabilities to do other things without producing all the frames. So anyway, if you leave it between 16 and 25 frames per second, now you have two different streams. You have the 4K stream and the D1 stream. But if you drop it down to 15, which is still above what the average out there in the field is, 15 frames per second, look at this now. It really opens it up. You actually have access to 4 different streams, and depending on the size of the pane that you're looking at in Control Center, the system with adaptive streaming will automatically send the correct one. You don't have to do any setup. Multi-stream encoding, in order to utilize this, you would, if it was just multi-stream encoding, you would have to set it all up yourself. However, adaptive streaming does it for you, and that's basically what we're going to talk about right here. Adaptive streaming technology, what is it? Well, we've talked about it already. We've talked about what it does. It saves bandwidth and system resources, and it does it dynamically. It doesn't require you to go in individual panes and set them up for the appropriate streams that you want to send. It does it on its own. So let's go ahead, and again, adaptive streaming technology will automatically send the correct stream that it has available based on its limitations that we saw in that chart, and will send you the appropriate streams for the size of the pane that's being displayed. So with that said, and again, without adaptive streaming, of course, we're stuck with the crushing blow of the too much data being sent across our networks for bandwidth, and then which has to also be decoded then by the individual machines. So with that said, let's go ahead and go right to the live demo. I've got Control Center set up right here so we can see it, and I do have 3 cameras, as you can see up in the top right here. Now, back in Admin Center, they're all being recorded at their highest resolutions. This right here is an old Quasar camera. It's a 1080p camera. It's being recorded at that rate. This over here is one of our newer aerial cameras. You can see the difference. Well, actually, this is shooting through a screen, so it's already looks a little bit troubled. But over here is one of our newer aerial cameras, also a 1080p camera. And then in the middle here, I have an Axis PTZ, which is limited to 720p. So one thing to show you right away, though, is these little panes right here. Notice I've got my on-screen display turned on, and adaptive streaming is up in Tools and Options. So let's go up and take a look at that really quick. Under Tools and Options, if you come to View and General, you can see right here Adaptive Streaming is where it's turned on, and it is on by default. One thing to note, though, even with it on, and I've also got on-screen display on, so you can see the video statistics here and can actually see the size that is sending to this individual pane and the bit rate, and this is really the important part we were talking about, the amount of bandwidth that needs to be sent to render the video itself. So let's check it out right here. Now this is my Axis camera, and notice that it's a 1280 by 720, so that's a 720p camera. If I move that into the larger pane, nothing happens at all. It stays exactly the same. Adaptive streaming is for FLIR/DVTEL cameras only, and I think that's why it's going to stay for at least a period of time. So this is a capability that's within our system and our cameras. It does not affect any other manufacturer's cameras. So we can see right here I've got a 720 by 480 stream, which is a 480p stream. If I move it up into a larger area and give it a little bit more real estate, it pauses for a second, And now you can see it's actually rendering the 1080p, and look at the bit rate, much higher, because it needs to render so much data. Wow, you can see some lighting issues too with the sun setting right there. But if I move it back down, now I'm up to, what, about 2400 KB. If I move it back down into a smaller pane, it will recognize that the pane is smaller, and it will revert back to the pane that's most appropriate, or excuse me, the stream that's most appropriate for this pane. And as you can see, a huge drop in the bit rate as well because of the downstepping, basically, of what is needed. We could do the same thing over here, or at least we could have if the video had not failed. But if we move it up into here, it should come right back up here in a second. As you can see, it does. And it also changes automatically to the 1080p. And again, the bit rate will rise as it sends all of that data that it needs to fill this entire pane with the 1080p. We're up to about 2000, somewhere around there. If I move it back down then to the smaller pane, it pauses for a second and then reverts right back to the 480p, which is most appropriate for this area. And again, also the bit rate dramatically reduced as well. For further FLIR security training, go to FLIR.com, then Products and Security. From the Security page, you would come to Support and then Training. On the training page, we have it divided currently between in-person training and online training. The in-person training includes certification classes in Latitude and many of our thermal technologies. The online training includes upcoming security webinars, which you see up here on the left, and recorded webinars, which of course continues to grow as we do the current webinars. But over on the right-hand side, you'll see our online training video library where we cover a number of different things in our repertoire. If we go to Latitude, you can see we have a series of Latitude training videos like this one that you just listened to, and we are adding to this list, and it is growing fast.